You know the story better than me. You tell it, Jennifer.
Okay, well, one day the kids were on the playground talking about superheroes, and that's a very important part of their lives in first grade. And they were talking about superheroes and what powers superheroes have. And neither one of our children, but this other child said, well, God is really the only one who has superpowers. And Julia, Kathleen's daughter, said, I don't believe in God. My son then turned to Julia and said, you're going to hell if you don't believe in God.
And there's the subject.
Not one other kid in this neighborhood does chores.
You're gonna get in trouble, Murtaugh.
Hey, Ma! Can we get some meatloaf?
He started it.
Mom!
What? Shut up!
What is the matter with you?
I know it's a school night, so we're just gonna get right down to it.
Hi, this is Harry H. Harrison Jr., and welcome to another edition of Will They Ever Leave? This is a special program for several reasons, in that A, we're going to be talking about religion, which is always a dicey topic or a fun topic, and two, we have a special guest, Jennifer Burks, who is with us, and she is a friend of Kathleen.
You're never going to get my name right, ever.
I'm leaving that in. I'm not.
Listen, I've heard worse, okay? It's been butchered worse than that.
Kathleen DeNooyer?
DeNooyer.
DeNooyer?
DeNooyer. If you say it DeNooyer, it's, let's just not go there.
And our useless millennial engineer, unmarried, unchilded, on anything, Zach.
Man responsible for recording, editing, and uploading the show. Yeah, you're right. Useless, totally.
He's 100%
Thanks for the intro, Harry. Yeah.
So, today's topic is going to be about religion, and I want to start this off with Kathleen and Jennifer, and they will bring it to life. Go.
Okay, so I guess we're telling the story of how we know each other then.
We got to know each other better.
Yes, that is a good way of putting it. Yes. So our children go to the same school, and we both chose for our child to go, her youngest, my only, to go to a D.I.S.D. public school here in North Dallas for a variety of reasons, but this is kind of one of them. And I have not been raising my daughter as a Christian from birth. We were raising her in her father's religion. He's Native American, and it's Lakota, and she's very culturally Native. And so about first grade.
First grade, yes.
You know the story better than me. You tell it, Jennifer.
Okay, well, one day the kids were on the playground talking about superheroes, and that's a very important part of their lives in first grade. And they were talking about superheroes and what powers superheroes have. And there are many kids in that class who actually go to church, and different churches, different denominations. But this one child, neither one of our children, but this other child said, well, God is really the only one who has superpowers. And Julia, Kathleen's daughter, said, I don't believe in God. My son then turned to Julia and said, you're going to hell if you don't believe in God.
And there's the subject.
We're talking about religion and
now
children.
We've got a show.
So we knew who each other, that we knew of each other before, but now we really know each other.
Yeah, we didn't interact too much because, she has a son, I have a daughter, so, you tend to go to the gendered sides.
Girl,
yeah.
yes.
And so, of course, I was upset, and my ex-husband was upset, and we went and talked. We emailed and spoke to the administration, and at one point I said to the principal, who's a fantastic principal, she's a rising star in D.I.S.D., I said, I really would like to speak to his mother about this. And she said, oh, no, I can't. I cannot facilitate that. We are not allowed to facilitate that. She's thinking lawyers and all kinds of craziness.
And their hands are really tied in terms of what they can say and can't say and do, and especially given the topic.
Absolutely. So I said, well, fine. I'm just going to go talk to Jennifer myself. So I snagged her. Was it drop off? Or I think it was drop off one day. And you were coming out of the portables, and I was like, let's have a chat. Your kid called and told my kid she's going to hell. And so we had this long discussion, and I think the biggest thing we both came out with is, even though it's public school and we're not all from the same religion, not all of the kids actually have faith in anything.
Of any form, right?
Yeah, there are some that are completely
agnostic
and atheist. We came up with the idea that the reason why we chose that school is that everybody there has a progressive idea of tolerance and inclusion. And so we wanted to come up with a way for the children to have these conversations, because we don't want to stop these kids from having these major conversations.
And that neighborhood, it's a neighborhood school. There's a large Jewish population. So we knew going in, there's a large Hispanic population. So by that fact alone. There's a large Catholic population.
And a large African population.
Right. And that tends to be more Protestant generally, but that's a stereotype. So we knew going in it was going to be diverse culturally, religiously, in all aspects of that. But that decision was really made at the basis with all of my children have gone there, and I have 3, is because we know what we believe in, we know what we're teaching our kids, but it's also important for them to know and understand that the world doesn't look like them.
Yeah.
So the question then is religion good for kids?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And why?
Jennifer, you start.
Well, I mean, I can talk about it personally, but I can also talk about
First
it.
off, I want to say we're not promoting any religion.
No.
We are just talking about religion, God, and that's
Right.
it.
No exclusive sponsorships.
No
here.
exclusive sponsorships.
We're not touting a
and-
denomination.
No, nobody specific.
But I would say generally, when you look at, when I observe what happens in the schools, what happens in the classrooms, the interactions with teachers and parents generally, I see what appears to me a lack of understanding, tolerance, behavior issues, all of those things, in my opinion, in watching these interactions, comes from kids who don't have a greater sense of purpose. When you can phrase things in terms of, this is why we do things, this is why we do. It's one thing to say, be good just to be a good person. It's another thing to say, we live under an edict. We operate this way. This is the standard by which we operate. And it seems like there's a big disconnect between our parents who are not in a faith of any kind. And again, it doesn't matter what faith you're in. I mean, to me, it's important what faith I'm in. But religion as a whole and what it does in terms of giving kids a purpose, their self-esteem, a self-worth, and something to work towards in a general life sense, and how that translates to their behavior, the way they act, the way they interact with people, and their understanding and tolerance of other people.
There was a study that I don't necessarily agree with, but it basically said that children of evangelical parents are less accepting of diversity than non-church kids.
I think that's the opposite.
You think that's the opposite?
Absolutely. Now, I can't say all. You can't sugarcoat it or
Yeah.
blanket. And you might not be asking for me to
No,
pipe in.
that's-
But I would say the opposite. I think that the media likes to portray that the evangelical group as a whole is less tolerant, when it appears, from my perspective, that they're actually more persecuted in a lot of ways. And that, because they're being told what they can and can't do, versus here's what I believe and why. And I think you need to be able to say that,
agree.
whether we agree or not.
No,
and that
and-
was what kind of rooted us in that first conversation that we had, is like, this is how I'm raising my kid. And I want my kid in this school because I want them to know that not everybody's like them, but that doesn't mean you can't be friends with them or you can't get along with them. And some of the best conversations and some of my best friends are people who aren't rooted in the same thing that I am. But I'm a better person for knowing and understanding why and how they think.
I think that's true. Kathleen?
I definitely agree with Jennifer. I grew up in the church. I had my schism with the church, my personal, from 14 to 34. I've since gone back to my church, and we are different denominations. But I think that religion does give you a good backbone. My dad, we had to go till we were 12, and it did give us a sense of morality, and it does give you this structure that allows you to understand sort of these larger world issues, and it gives you compassion towards other people. I don't think, there are a few children who are atheist, and their parents are atheist, and they actually tend to be the more ignorant, intolerant little children.
Interesting, and I think this figure is right. 60 to 70% of children, when they hit like 18 or 20, practice their parents' religion. Now there's a quite large defection from one religion to another as they go from their 18 to 28, 30 years old. And it could be just switching dominations. It could be just switching complete faiths. I raised my boys in an Episcopal church, and they were acolytes. They carried torches and everything.
I was too.
Were you an acolyte?
Oh my goodness gracious. Yes, I was. It was the most awesome thing. I loved sitting behind the pulpit with the pastor. The only thing I didn't like about my pastor, Pastor John, was that he has really bad breath. And he would like sit right here when he was talking to you.
So I mean, they were raised in the church, and at night we said prayers every meal we said prayers, and we said evening prayers, and to me it was important that the boys learn they're never alone, that there's always someone they can reach out and touch to if they think they're alone, they're not, and to give them a sense of morality and what is expected of them from the church and from me. So one Christmas, one Easter, when my oldest son Sage was like 17, he was a senior in high school, and we usually met people after church for lunch. So we were sitting with a group of people, and I asked Sage's friend Blake, "Did you go to church? I didn't see you there." And he went, "No, I had to sleep in." And Sage said, "I wasn't ever given that opportunity." And that's true. It was this Sunday we go to church. Wednesday we go to Wednesday Night Live, whatever. So for me it was important, and I felt like that while they never really met any close friends in church, we could always tell what kids had a sense of spirituality in their family, whether they were Jewish or Christian or whatever. If there was a God in their lives, it was kind of reflected.
And you find a cohesion in that, even if you're not in the same denomination or faith.
Absolutely.
And there is in the sense, the idea, the sense of morality, this sort of backbone. There's another aspect that I have found, I've rediscovered in myself in coming back to the church, is a sense of peace, a sense of meditativeness, a sense of stillness. So my ex-husband, he's Lakota, commonly known as the Sioux, and that is also the name of their religion. And it's very spiritual. It's a native religion. I'm not going to get into all of the specifics of it because it's different for everybody. It's a little less structured than Christianity, Judaism, Islam, excuse me. But we've been raising her in his religion because he's faithful in that way. They come from a line of medicine men. And my nephew is actually going to be the first medicine man in many generations. And this kid has so much peace in his heart. He is just so meditative. He's the 16-year-old. We don't worry about him going out drinking,
let me ask you a question.
Like that.
Why are millennials leaving the church?
You know, for me, it was a personal schism because I watched the leadership of the church go through this grandiose hypocrisy that made me so angry.
Okay, that was a specific incident, but generally speaking...
That's what it is. Millennials don't like to be told, you do this because I say so, but I'm not going to do that as well. If you're going to talk the talk, walk the walk. And a lot of people see scandal, see the church elders behaving in a way that they should not behave, and it makes them angry. It makes them irritated. And instead of looking at it the way, and again, we'll use me as an example, instead of saying my schism is not with God or whoever my God is, my schism is with those church elders or the church, they automatically walk away from religion and faith and spirituality completely. That's just... Zach, our useless millennial producer.
I do have a thought on this. What a segue. And every time I go to voice my opinion, it's like, well, let's all discount him first and say how terrible he is.
It won't be terrible.
I want to hear what you have to say.
Here's what I think. Every generation is raised under an educational standard that is supposed to be stronger than the previous generation, right? 200 years ago, we didn't know a whole lot about calculus. We know a lot more about it now, and kids learn about it in high school. Each generation is supposed to be raised under more stronger educational rigor and standards based on U.S. testing scores. I don't know if that's true, but we're supposed to be. And the idea is that, so I've heard, to toot the millennial horn for a minute, millennials, by that logic, are supposed to be the most educated generation. We're the ones who had to go through the most, had to learn the most so far. It's not speaking towards Gen Zers. Because we're the most educated, I think we're more skeptical. It's a little harder for us to believe stories about a man in the sky. It just is. And it's hard for us to get up every morning, every Sunday, and go to church, and every Wednesday go to church and think to ourselves, yeah, I'm totally into this. Like, I can get behind the idea of a Bible as a book of morals, as a book of lessons, of course. But it's just hard to believe, like in say, a Catholic setting, that you're actually legitimately, literally consuming the blood and body of Christ. It's like, it's just hard to get behind.
I get that.
And I think that's where the denominations come in. And if you take the Bible for the Bible, and I'm not going to discount any particular faith.
Yeah, I don't mean to do that.
But to your point, I think that's where you have to go back to the book. Mm-hmm. Because if you go back to the book and the source, nowhere in the Bible does it actually say that it actually becomes the body and the blood of Christ in the Bible. That's what the Catholic Church has said.
Has
Right,
developed.
and there's so many
Developed
different
as
ways
part
to
of-
perceive that
Right,
information. Yeah.
Right.
You
So
know,
if
the biggest problem is that most kids only learn about their parents' religion.
Right.
That is the only thing they learn. They don't have a comparative religion studies. They don't study. They don't study Methodists. Don't study Protestants. Don't study Catholics. Don't study Episcopalians.
Right.
It is their parents' religion totally.
and it's this is what I said, and so this is what you have to do.
Right.
And
right.
that segues nicely into one of the articles that you had pulled for us today. And this is written by a woman named Wendy Thomas Russell. And she starts off by saying it's the 10 Commandments of teaching your child religion. And she starts off by saying she's completely secular. She's not religious. But number one is expose your kid to many religions.
Right.
And I think the comparative religion class, that is such an invaluable thing that I took in college. And it was fascinating to see where all of these different religions blend together. But again, one of the things that I saw and I see in the two religions that my daughter is now experiencing and being raised in is the basic idea of human morality, being a good person within your community, respecting your family, doing faithful things. I think that's the most important part of religion. I see what Zach is saying. And here's a good example off of what Zach said. My daughter asked me one day, and this is right when I started going back to church, she said, "Mom, how was the universe created?" And I was like, oh, man.
Wow.
I'm driving home. We have a 45-minute traffic jam, Dallas traffic, drive ahead of me. And I'm like, oh, this is awful. Because I believe in science. I'm very well educated. I have multiple degrees. I believe in science. But for me, in my personal faith, there's no conflict between the Big Bang and God creating the universe as I see it. But a lot of people, it's one or the other. It's so black and white. And I think our generation is more black and white than we like to let on.
Well, the biggest problem, the great thing about religion is what it introduces into your family, a spiritual life. The worst thing about it is the prejudice and bigotry that goes on if you're not of the same religious faith, or you're not of the same denomination. You're going to hell, and I'm going to be saved. And that argument, that belief is what's sinking religion all across the board.
Yeah.
Versus having a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can all accept a higher power. We can all maybe accept atheists, but I'm not even sure. Most atheists I've met are mad at God.
Something's happened.
Something's happened to
They're
destroy
all
their
kind of
faith.
secretly agnostics. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are. I was agnostic for a long time. I was like, I realized, you know what? I'm just not happy with the church. But then again, what am I doing? I'm back in the church with my parents every Sunday.
So whatever you believe as a parent, you are going to pass on to your child.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to pass on, I think as that article continues, you have to pass on, look, other people are going to believe different things.
Yes.
It is not up to you to convert them.
Yes.
It is not up to you to judge them. It is not up to you to send them to hell because they don't believe like we believe. Listen and
Well, you can't send them to hell, so.
right.
not with that attitude.
But I think that's what's most troubling thing to millennials. I mean, to me, is the firm belief that the tribalism that goes into religion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm right, you're wrong.
Absolutely.
And if we could teach our kids not only about our religion, but teach them to respect other people's beliefs without trying to convert them, without trying to argue, without trying to. You can ask them questions to learn, but you don't need to judge them because they don't believe the same way we do.
I think part of the problem, from my perspective, is that a lot of parents don't really understand enough of what their own faith or religion believes to talk about that in addition to what other people believe or what other denominations or religions believe, to even have a comparison, between the Protestants. What's the difference between the denominations versus Catholic or
Right.
Catholic Christians? Will they believe this or this or this? There's a whole, not to get into some of the other ones.
It's also one of the biggest mountains to climb as a parent. It was difficult for me to set aside my emotions to go talk to you, and we didn't really know each other on a personal level at that point.
Right.
And we had to sit there and be the calm, rational people and talk about this and not get upset and not be accusatory. And that's a mountain to climb. It was very adult of us, I must say. It was very adult of us. But the biggest thing that came out of that conversation is we need to figure out how to give our children tools to have these conversations because they're going to have them.
Well, I'll tell you where it starts. I belong to a men's group, and probably about 60 guys, 70 guys at sometimes. And if I ask them, how many of you pray with your wives? It's just like blankness.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, no, that's really too intimate for me. And it is intimate. But I think that if a husband and wife, if a father and mother can't discuss religion among themselves, they'll never be able to discuss it with their kids.
Yeah. And it's more than just going and putting your butt in the seat.
Absolutely.
And you know, saying, oh, I belong, or I write my little tithe check. You actually, you have to be involved and engaged with your religion. Question it. Ask questions. Ask how it applies. It is applicable to your life. And that's really the way to draw your children in and to actually engage them in a way that makes sense. Did I want to answer the universe question to Julia? No, I really didn't. But I took the time to.
And with most parenting questions, whether it be how birds and the bees or really whatever, it's they aren't necessarily looking for what they think you're looking for. It doesn't have to be this big, I have to know all the scientific data or the understand. They just need an answer. And so you can give them a nugget without having to feel like you're.
So let's say you're a child and you're raised in a very fundamental, maybe right-wing religion, and you believe that you're taught that the earth was created in 7 days, 6,000 years ago. So what happens when that child goes to school and the teacher starts teaching science? Is that child supposed to raise his hand and say, wait a minute, no, this is all wrong. This was, I know because it happened 6,000 years ago and it started with Adam and Eve. Or what happens to his mental framework when he starts hearing another side of evolution, another side of creation?
Well, I don't think they'll ever hear another side of creation in the schools. I think they're going to hear millions of years ago. And I think for us, and because that's happened in our house, my son has raised his hand and said, we don't know that the world was created for millions of years ago. But we don't, we believe what the Bible says, but we don't know is that literal days? Is it figurative days? Is it, and different pastors, different experts have had different opinions on whether it's an old earth or a young earth or but my son has done that. And I think for us, the way we framed that conversation was science is presented as fact, but they don't necessarily, it's not necessarily fact. It's a theory, it's an opinion. They use terms like experts saying this, just like creations say this versus the evolutionary. But it's still all a theory, an idea. We don't know. We don't know exactly how many years it took. We don't know.
So that's what you taught your son?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But we teach a creation. Mm-hmm. But we've also said, this is what the teachers are going to tell you. This is what you're going to be tested on. And you have to know how to answer the questions. You need to know how to pass the class.
Right.
Right.
But there's a conversation that can be had in there to say, that's an opinion, that's a theory, but so is this.
Well, and for me on that subject, I just tell Julia, I said, there's corporeal, there's the earthly, and then there's the ethereal, there's the heavenly. And the two don't necessarily have to go hand in hand. Science is something we can carbon date things, we can do this, that, and the other. But faith is not something that I can grab a hold and hand it to you. It is something that is so deep inside your soul that it took us many, many years to figure out that the soul was not in the stomach, as the medievals believed. But
where is it?
I don't know anatomy well enough.
But I would also
Didn't pay attention
add
to science.
that's
Yeah.
not what's going to get those kind of details. Everybody's going to have a different opinion on, and that's not what's going to get you into heaven either. It doesn't matter how that happened.
Rigidity is the thing that we're discussing.
Right.
Not being so rigid in the way you teach your children. You have to be, again, are you going to be the hellfire and brimstone or the more loving side of it?
So
And there's
what's
some
the
things
most
that really
important
matter,
thing?
and there's some things that don't.
What's
Yeah.
the most important thing you can teach your child about religion? Or what can you take from religion? What's the most important thing you can take from religion and give to your child?
Morality. Basic human decency. Respect your mother, respect your father. That is across all religions. Respect your mother and father. Do well for your community. Don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat on your spouse. There are certain aspects that
Ten
go...
Commandments.
The Ten Commandments. But in the Lakota religion, you and those lights, the Lakota religion, there's 12 rules, and they're basically the same thing as the 10 Commandments. And if you go into other religions, they're all the same. Be a good human being.
I think it's love.
Same thing.
Next
12,
episode,
10,
Kathleen,
1.
morality and love. Yeah.
Same thing.
It's a one.
I think it's love. I think morality.
Mm-hmm.
That comes behind it. But what I tried to teach my kids was the most important thing they could ever do was love. And that's what Jesus said, and that's what God says. Interesting thing is...
that is the one thing he said. I mean, he didn't say the 10 Commandments. He said, love your neighbor as yourself.
Right. Right. So that's what we kind of harped on all the time.
Yeah.
I didn't really go into creation stories with my kids. I kind of let them go to church and go to Sunday school and kind of wrestle with it themselves. I was much more... in fact, I encouraged them to wrestle with it. And to me, if you try and take... So many religions get worried if there's a mystery. But to me, I'm comfortable in mystery. Yeah. I'm very comfortable in mystery.
I think the Bible presents a lot of mystery. There's a lot it tells us, but there's a lot it doesn't.
And I'm very comfortable with a loving God who allows terrible things to happen.
Right.
I can't explain it. I can't even try to explain it.
It's life.
But that's mystery.
Really quick, just to cut in here, and I know we only have a few minutes left, so I don't want to dig too far into this, but I think one of the most difficult things about teaching your kids religion is usually built on the idea of good, right and wrong, good and bad, light and dark. It's very easy. And I think as human beings, one of the big questions we strive to find out is, what's it all mean? Why are we here? What's it all for? And we're very logical. We're very, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Like, it's very easy for us to understand. It's why we understand math. It's why we understand language, our ability to communicate with each other. So science, math usually feels very much like that. 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's very logical. It's very easy to break down and understand.
Yeah.
Right and wrong. It's either correct or it's incorrect. And when you bring in religion, you're trying to introduce faith, but just like you have the opposite of right being wrong, just like you have the opposite of heaven being hell, the opposite of faith is doubt, and you introduce both when you have religion. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's the hurdle you've got to overcome when you're introducing faith. You have to also bring that in and say there's doubt. You're allowed to say maybe this isn't as legitimate,
But doubt can be
it's hard to balance
tool.
that.
Doubt,
of course.
For faith, doubt is a powerful tool because for me, I doubted for so many years based on what was happening to me, but it ended up reinforcing my faith through the years. But Jennifer, what has religion done for you as a parent in terms of parenting your children? Because your children, you have 3 children, yes?
Right. My
And
oldest is 14.
Yeah.
I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. I think it's made it a whole lot easier. I don't know how I would walk through some of the things that we've had to talk about without having that as a foundation.
Sure.
If I didn't have that compass or have those, whether you want to call them morals or edicts or just that basis of rooted of how and why we do things, this is the reason we do it, and this is why, and this is how we have the conversation, and this is, it's made it a whole lot easier to answer all the questions. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty cut and dry example for us. But it goes back to, we do that for a reason, and we follow this example. We follow the example that was presented to us in the Bible, and if it's not in there, then it might be not as important. If it's in the Bible and spelled out, to us it's important. Mm-hmm. If it's not in there, we get to kind of decide how we want to do it, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong way to do it. But if it's spelled out in the Bible, then that to us is kind of the foundation of what we're going to carry forward.
So something very interesting happened to my youngest son who went to dental school. He was just a typical teenager, and we weren't, even though we prayed, even though we went to church, I never regarded us as a religious family. It was just, we were just a normal American family.
Right.
And my son went to dental school, and his first year was anatomy. And he called me one day and said, "I understand now." And I said, "What?" "I understand creation." And I said, "How?" He said, "Dad, you cannot take apart this body and think this was a mistake or this was just a happenstance. You cannot look at the human body. You cannot look at the eye. You can't look at the
detail.
The tiny details of 1 million cells in the human eye, and each thing doing exactly the right thing. You got another eye over here." He said, "You can't look at that and think, well, this just happened." So it was very interesting. He as a scientist, he became a creationist.
I was going to say he used science to reinforce his religious beliefs.
Which is what I was going to say. There's a whole group, and there's one of the leaders actually goes to our church. It's the Institute for Creation Science Research. And so for us, it's easy to look at, okay, here's the evolution versus the creation. There are scientists who believe in evolution, but there's also scientists, hard and fast scientists who believe in creation, to your point.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to have the conversation of this is where we fall versus this side, but we respect people to have that view. That's just not our view.
So, I don't know where I stand on creation. I know where my son stands. I believe in evolution. I believe in the Big Bang, but I believe God orchestrated the Big Bang. So, I don't know if that's
But where do you stand on parenting and religion? Our parenting expert, Harry Harrison.
I stand. I'll tell you a funny story. So I've written.
Sitting.
No,
This is why we don't sit next to each other.
because she's anyway. You know, I write parenting books, and one day a father wrote me this letter that said, "Mr. Harrison, my daughter was standing in, I think it was Home Depot, and she saw your book, 1,001 Things Every Teenager Needs to Know, and she was peacefully reading it, and she was laughing, and then she started crying and screaming." And I went over to her and said, "What's going on?" She said, "Look at this passage. It says you need to invite God into the bedroom. How can you bring up God to teenagers? What are you doing? You're making them miserable. You really upset my teen." I'm thinking, dear God, you mean you've never talked to your daughter about God?
Apparently not.
This is where I stand. I stand that you have to raise your kids in some faith.
It helps.
Yes, you have to.
It really does. And what the Jesuits say is, you give me your child till 7, I'll have them for life. And that's the reality. That's what you've been saying in the last several podcasts, is by a certain age, a very young age, 4 is sort of where you've targeted it, that they've learned everything. You know, the basics. You can
Right.
overcome some challenges, but at the same time, that's it.
They've set their morals and principles.
But
and
you
values.
give them a foundation. You lay it out. They have to decide what they want to do when they become an adult.
Absolutely.
as
Right.
You
And-
did in your own
and you have to
podcast.
tell them, you may have
But
to
you
wrestle
give them a
with this.
foundation. You have to present them with the option in order to let them decide.
And you have to
Exactly.
okay
That they wanna continue.
You have to okay that it's okay to wrestle with this. It's okay to go through doubt. In fact,
Everybody does.
yeah, if you don't go through doubt, then you're just parenting me.
Then you're not really. Then I don't
Yeah.
think your faith is real if you
Absolutely.
don't have doubt.
Or you're a millennial, one or the other.
So we have to wrap it up.
We
Damn
do.
it.
I know we're already out of time.
I know.
It's such a shame.
So this has
They could
been
go on so long.
another great episode of Will They Ever Leave? And thank you, Jennifer, for
You're
joining us.
welcome.
Thank you, and Kathleen, for joining us.
I love you, Harry.
Hey, Zach, did you
Harry.
know
Yeah.
that 15% of American voters believe that the media adds secret mind-controlling techniques to TV?
Hopefully those aren't
Debates.
those aren't registered voters, right?
They're probably registered.
I'm
there.
afraid of boomers.
They're double
But-
Hey,
registered.
maybe I just don't see the forest for the trees
Conspiracy
here.
theorists.
Yeah, maybe there is some mind controlling technology, and I'm a victim.
Well,
so
no,
I-
you're part of it.
Oh right.
Yeah.
It goes back to the Beatles and spinning records.
You're right.
Right.
But
What
they
if
wouldn't
would
know
you
about
recommend
that.
If you play
had
this
one?
podcast
You
backwards,
millennials
you get a
wouldn't
secret
know about
message.
that.
No.
I went through a Beatle phase, but it was an 8-track.
Oh my goodness.
I almost bought a copy of Yellow Submarine the other day. No lie. It's a great album.
33
mine.
LP
It's
or
good
like
stuff.
a CD?
Oh, CD.
You got to do
So
something.
normally-
my 2006 Camry only has a CD player.
Normally this
It doesn't have an 8-track
No, unfortunately.
like the 78.
Yeah.
So normally, this is when Kathleen would hold up one of my books, say Father to Son, and say, "I love this book. It's fantastic. You can buy it at bookstores everywhere." But she didn't bring a book.
No, I want mother
doesn't
to
have a
daughter.
son either.
And I don't know why you're not just gifting me mother to daughter. Apparently, I need all the parenting advice I can. get.
Apparently.
I like that Kathleen, as co-host, made the executive decision not to sponsor one of Harry's books. You're like, no, sorry, not doing it. Yeah, it's the wrong one, Harry. Too bad. You don't get one this week.
Yeah, that's your job, Harry, not mine.
Okay, mother to daughter. I will bring to Kathleen. It's also a great book for moms. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been wonderful. We will see you and hear you, or you will hear us and see us next week.
Listen, rate, and review.
Listen, rate, and review.
Yep, that's it. Will They Ever Leave is a production of the Real News Communications Network in collaboration with Harry H. Harrison Jr. This episode was recorded and edited by Matt Stoker and myself, Zach Lewis. Production music courtesy of the Audio Jungle Music Library. To find out more about Harry and his work, or to purchase one of his books, visit www.fearlessparenting.com.
You're listening to RNCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.